You order a taxi. In a couple of minutes, it's at your door. Remember calling a cab over the phone and then waiting several hours for it? This was so long ago that it now seems like something from the Middle Ages. You can pick up the vehicle type, the class, price, a child seat, and sometimes even the music, all in an app. It's a pity, though, that it doesn't show where your money goes, as it may as well be some beautiful island somewhere in the Atlantic. Same with your taxis. They go there too. Instead of being spent on a new road surfacing or street lighting in your hood. This is Uberization, based on the principles of the sharing economy. Researchers do not yet agree on what the concept of the sharing economy embraces and what it left behind. They usually define it as people giving each other temporary access to their underutilized assets, also for money. The key word here is temporary, but other researchers also regard websites like eBay as part of the sharing economy, though the former owners of the old sneakers sold there don't expect to get them back in a month. Another question is, what can be regarded as an asset? Just physical property? Or maybe your personal time too, for instance. This would make any service ordered online from a non-professional, cleaner, repairers, etc., fall under the category of the sharing economy. Not to get tangled up, we turn to some of the most obvious forms of the sharing economy. The simplest things to share are your home and your car, but also parking spaces, boats, books, tools, clothes, and even food. Overall, sharing is good. So let's start with good. The benefits of the sharing economy are clear to anyone who has ever took an Uber vehicle instead of a taxi, or stayed in a hip Brooklyn loft at half the price of a hotel. The overhead costs for renting servers are lower by far than the operational expenses of owning millions of homes and cars, which means lower final prices for us. It boosts consumption and significantly improves quality of life. We don't have to own a car or a summer cottage anymore. If necessary, we can just use someone else's anywhere in the world. What's more, we don't have to seek out a one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, there are a minivan, a sports car, a pickup truck, all at your service. You never know when you might need a pickup after all. It's beneficial not only for users, but also for service providers. The sharing economy has niches in it for the unemployed, young parents, and creative freelancers, providing them with the opportunity to work flexible hours and earn extra income. The assumption is anyone can be a micro-entrepreneur in this brave new world. The founders of the sharing sector's most successful companies always claim their mission is to change the world for the better, and that it's not enough to talk about money alone, and so they turn to social and environmental arguments. Proponents of the sharing economy argue that it helps create new, meaningful social ties and encourages social mixing. The asset providers are usually older and richer than their renters. They now have something bringing them together. Besides, it's generally believed that by sharing, we save material resources and the energy otherwise needed for the production of new cars or the construction of hotels. As the numbers show, a car sits idle for 95% of its life. But if it is connected to a car-sharing platform, each of the users would produce fewer car kilometers, and the atmosphere would suffer less from carbon emissions. Finally, the sharing economy is simply a very pleasant ideology with anti-consumerist and anti-corporate ethics. In this new world, everyone trusts each other and everyone is a free entrepreneur independent from corporate bondage. Perhaps the resentful taxi drivers and city officials just have trouble fitting into the new reality. The proponents of the sharing economy often forget about the indirect economic effects. For example, hotel earnings declined significantly where Airbnb grew in Texas. But it wasn't Hilton or Radisson who suffered. Most affected were lower-end, cheap hotels and their employees, people much more vulnerable than homeowners in this state. Those outside the sharing economy lose out. But what about those inside it? Making everyone an entrepreneur automatically take away social security coverage from those that are most in need. Uber offers its drivers neither medical insurance nor retirement benefits, just an app to search for new orders. If they were employees, Uber would owe them $852 million in social security payments. Then there are the housing costs. When renting by the day to tourists become most lucrative for homeowners, long-term tenants, which mean the actual locals have to move to less attractive areas. And those who remain have to get used to having new neighbours every night. The townfolk can hardly be expected to like this. And sooner or later they will start voting in politicians in favour of putting an end to convenience services for the common good, as has happened already in Barcelona. And the grievance of the authorities against the sharing economy don't stop here. Uber, for instance, registers its intellectual property in Bermuda, while Airbnb pay taxes on transactions in dozens of countries in Ireland and the Channel Islands. Governments are far from always being right, but taxes are hardly a senseless matter, right? Sometimes the sharing platform's insistence on a social benefit fails to stand up to scrutiny. They claim that they are building communities of equal users that empower ordinary people. But at the same time, they are growing increasingly professionalized. 93% of overnight stays through Airbnb are with 13% of homeowners, professional hosts, most of whom have more than one listing. They are not living there themselves. So this is more old school renting than anything you could call sharing. In the end, the triumph of the sharing economy is inevitably associated with an increase in social inequality. In order to start earning with Uber or Airbnb, you need to own, at a minimum, a home or a car, or the opportunity to rent it out. It is also preferable to live in a big city or a popular vacation area. The more expensive your flat or car is, the more you earn. Ultimately, the sharing economy most benefits the middle-aged, educated, affluent urban dweller, while everyone else is left behind in this beautiful future, whose final appearance will be decided by an aggressively growing platform rather than its users. This is why the sharing economy is sometimes called neoliberalism on steroids. There's also a complicated issue regarding racial discrimination on online platforms. For example, Airbnb is demonstratively punishing its racial users, but the fact remains, male African Americans still earn an average 12% less than the white hosts for identical properties in the same location. And Uber and Lyft drivers make African Americans wait longer for a car and cancel their rides more frequently. The environmental aspect is likewise not so straightforward. Rather than reduce them, car sharing can actually boost auto sales. And while a single Uber vehicle can replace 6 to 9 private cars, it will end up travelling 10 to 20% more than all of them put together. On other sectors of the sharing economy, there is no empirical evidence or any positive environmental effect at all. On the contrary, it is suggested that lower prices can in fact trigger increased demands. The money earned from sharing our property can be spent again on new sneakers or fancy coffee machines, which again means using energy and scarce resources. Let's sum up with the case of Linda Lani, a driver from South Africa. He was very excited when he first joined Uber. Only cashless payments were allowed. And it has been always very dangerous to have cash in your car in a country with such a high crime rate. But after getting him and thousands of his colleagues into their driver pool, Uber introduced cash payments, just to grow their business by getting customers without credit cards. Simple business logic thus wins out over the idea of a better future. And the occasional murder of Uber drivers and the massive street protests that go with them are hardly enough to make this monopolist turn down such a lucrative share in the market.